So safety car's out. If we thought the drama was done at the start, it certainly wasn't. It was only just getting begun. First thing to look at here is Bottas's safety car restart. It was a strange technique, and it all comes from the first thing, the safety car lights went out really, really late. If we take this shot, the safety car lights are still on. He's turning into the final corner pretty much, the safety car, before he turns the lights off. Until he turns the lights off, Bottas can't control the pace. He has to follow the safety car within 10 car lengths. Yes, he's closer than 10 car lengths, but taking no risk, leading the race, doesn't want to drop back and get close to the cusp of it. So really, he's got to follow the safety car here. Why the safety car lights went out quite so late, I have no idea, because it means that Bottas can't back up the pack, as we've seen at other races. Michael Massey explained after the event that the safety car, the distance actually to the start line was the same roughly as usual, and that's why the safety car lights went out there. But it doesn't really make sense, because on tracks like Mugello, where you've got a really long run down to the start line, obviously the safety car lights need to go out earlier, because you need to give the drivers more time to back off before they come to the final corner, and that's basically what happened here. We knew, the teams knew, Bottas knew that the safety car was coming in, all from about turn 10 in the middle sector. Why the safety car lights didn't turn off at some point between there and the final corner, I don't know. That's what makes sense. And in days gone by, the race leader would only know that the safety car was coming in when the lights went off. There wasn't team radios, and you'd just be looking at that to then back up the bunch. Now we have team radios. I think it's taken for granted, really, that you know it's coming in, so get ready, and then the lights are a bit of a formality. But here they weren't, and it really contributed to Bottas's restart. If we look at Hamilton having his own safety car restart in Monza last time out, he's got Lance Stroll behind him in the racing point, so he's also got slightly a smaller threat than his rival Mercedes driver. And safety car light's still on the way down to Parabolica. He's dropped back a good chunk further than Bottas, to be honest. He's actually probably right on the cusp of that 10 car length rule, but we know Hamilton's already incurred a penalty for breaching regulations. But look, under the DHL sign, and the safety car lights have already gone off, Hamilton now has quite a lot of time before Parabolica to slow the pack, and he really does slow the pack and lets the safety car go. You need to, because a Formula One car accelerating is so much faster than a safety car. They're just that rapid in a straight line, and through the corners as well, of course. But Hamilton then goes really, really slowly, and now he's got the buffer. He can do what he likes, weaves, he's got Stroll behind him, and now the focus is just on catching Stroll out, basically, so he can't follow, and Hamilton accelerates just before the final corner. Going back to what Bottas had, he basically can't do that, because the safety car's at the final corner when the lights go out. Bottas is there with him, and there's no element of surprise he can give to Hamilton, really, because if he went at the final corner, he'd just overtake the safety car and incur a penalty, or he'd have to back off, and that would be more dangerous than ultimately what he actually did. So really, for me, Bottas does the sensible thing here. He controls the pace. He now knows that he kind of can't unleash at the final corner, which is convention. So he just goes nice and steady, weaving, but at a really constant speed. Bottas, which is the safest thing to do in this situation, and he basically limits the length of the straight by just going really, really slowly for the whole first half of it. He reduces Hamilton's chance of getting a slipstream and passing down to turn 1. We've seen similar restarts to this in past races. If we look at Brazil last year, not all that long ago, again it's Hamilton at the front of the race, Max Verstappen just behind, and Hamilton doesn't accelerate out of the final corner because there's a really long straight coming up, and he doesn't want Verstappen to slipstream past him. So he waits and he weaves on the straight, then he goes. He doesn't go all the way up to the start-finish line with Max Verstappen, but he does go very late compared to what convention would say out of the final corner. But he actually maybe goes too early, because look, as this unfolds, Verstappen gets the slipstream and Verstappen goes around his outside. So Bottas actually going later than Hamilton gives Hamilton less chance to slipstream him. And if we now play this through then for the Mercedes, on board with Hamilton, you can see he's right there with Bottas. He knows basically what Bottas is going to do. He's going to go in the next couple of 100 metres, but trying to just preempt it is very, very difficult, and Bottas is always going to have the edge because he's putting his own right foot down, and Hamilton can only go when Bottas puts his right foot down, otherwise he's going to overtake him behind the safety car, and it'll be very messy. So Bottas gets the jump, as he probably would in this situation, as Hamilton timed it very, very well. And still Lewis tucks into the slipstream, and he's almost able to attack Valtteri down at turn 1, but he can't quite. So if Bottas had gone a little bit earlier, the slipstream effect would have been bigger for Hamilton. He would have been side by side to turn 1, and we'll see how that goes later on. As it was, Bottas has held this one off, and I think he did the right thing. Further back though, carnage. I don't think this was to do with Bottas. This is to do with some opportunistic midfielders who leave a gap, and they do try and predict what Bottas is doing. And I think initially this comes from the man in 9th place, Daniel Kvyat. So here we are on board with Kvyat and the AlphaTauri up to the final corner. Now he should know the safety car is coming in as well, and he's got quite a big gap to the car ahead of him, which is Lando Norris. Comes through the final corner, starts to accelerate, and then crucially, look, slows down. Now look at all those 8 cars ahead. They're relatively equidistant in what is a normal sort of safety car restart, everyone bunched up, ready to go. A bit like we saw Hamilton to Bottas. It's the same back to Leclerc, Albon, and everyone down to Norris, really. Slight fluctuations in gaps. But Kvyat now could close that gap a little bit more, but he doesn't. He holds back a bit from Norris and then tries to accelerate as they get to the straight. He accelerates, holds, and then accelerates again, and then slows as he realises that basically the leaders aren't going. But he can see everyone in front, so that's okay for Kvyat. The problem now comes is Kvyat's tried to preempt Bottas going, and Bottas hasn't gone. If Bottas had gone at that moment, Kvyat would have had a flying start, and he would have roared past most of these guys in front. Maybe that closing speed is also a little bit dangerous. But because Bottas didn't go, Kvyat's had to back off again. That's fine for Daniel Kvyat. For the car behind Daniel Kvyat, it's a little bit harder because he sees Kvyat go and he thinks, oh, we're racing now. So he's flat out, Esteban Ocon just behind. For the car behind Esteban Ocon, it's a little bit harder again because George Russell sees Ocon go, sees Kvyat go and thinks, oh, we're definitely racing. So he's flat out, goes a little bit faster than even the car ahead. For the car behind that, it's even quicker and it goes basically all the way back. They're on the throttle harder earlier and they only see the danger later because they're all tunneled in. And then it starts to get a little bit scarier for those further back. On board with Nicholas Latifi now in the Williams, everyone's now accelerating into the final corner, all these slower guys, because they can't see the leaders anymore. The field's relatively spread out because drivers are leaving big gaps to try and preempt the race leader. So Latifi, he's actually kind of flat out into the final corner. I think he thinks he's racing already, and they haven't even got round the final corner and the leaders are still crawling up to the line. Then other drivers in front slow and he's so close to hitting Kevin Magnussen ahead. Look at that, he's got an armful of lock just steering out at the final corner. And that was super close for Latifi because he already thought he was racing. And that's all because of the slowing of the midfielders and then they're trying to preempt. Now, Magnussen gets going, then they all accelerate, and you can see now Latifi is tucked in behind Kevin Magnussen, who's tucked in behind George Russell. They're all trying to slipstream, but suddenly Latifi sees them all slowing at the last minute, and he almost wipes into Kevin Magnussen. Finally, let's have a look at this with the drivers that ultimately have the crash. Antonio Giovinazzi, and this one made no sense to me at all. I think Giovinazzi was asleep on this safety car restart. We come into the final corner, and if I pause it there, what on earth he's doing, leaving this amount of gap, I have no idea. Latifi thinks he's racing, some of the other drivers think they're racing. At the very least, Giovinazzi should be with Latifi right now. He's miles away, and if Bottas had gone earlier, his team will not be impressed with this. He's seconds away from the car ahead on a safety car restart. It's a chance to make places. But the drivers ahead haven't gone. So Latifi, you see that big dart out as he almost hits the back of Magnussen. Giovinazzi still hovers back a little bit. Now he's trying to do the same as Kvyat. Then everyone suddenly accelerates and tucks in. Giovinazzi's tucked in behind Latifi, who's tucked in behind Magnussen. They're all flat out on the throttle. And bam, Latifi moves out. Giovinazzi doesn't see him. Magnussen's backed off. He's seen a little bit earlier the danger ahead, and Giovinazzi hasn't. Final view of this is the man behind Giovinazzi, Carlos Sainz. And to be honest, I think Sainz does a more sensible approach to this safety car restart, yet he has the biggest crash in it. So, again, I pause it at the moment I paused it for Giovinazzi. What's he doing? Sainz is right behind Giovinazzi, and he must be really screaming in his helmet now. Why is he not closing up to the car ahead? It's looking like a really poor restart for Giovinazzi, but because Bottas hasn't gone yet, he gets away with this. But Sainz is right there, trying to do the right thing really and be right on the car ahead. And as they think they go green, Sainz has a little look ahead at the cars, but there's about 5 or 6 cars now that are all accelerating flat out to the pack. Then he tucks back behind Giovinazzi, takes the slipstream, and bam, huge impact into the back of Giovinazzi. Magnussen's there as well, and he's out the race. Nothing Carlos Sainz could do about this. It's circumstances because of Bottas's late restart, which I think was the right thing for Valtteri to do. The track, It's a really long run, and that's why Bottas did the late restart. Safety car lights going off late. Don't know why that was the case. That doesn't make any sense to me at all, but that contributed to why Bottas did the restart he did. Finally, you got the chances in the midfield who are trying to preempt what Bottas is doing, get massive runs on everyone ahead on the long straight. That's the big one on why this crash was caused, and actually a lot of them were hauled up to the FIA afterwards and they got a warning for what they did. That's why we had this big scary looking crash, and this graph here shows very clearly exactly what we've just seen. So this is a graph now showing the speed trace of a lot of the drivers in the field on the safety car restart. A mess of colours, but let's try and explain what's going on here. The teal colour, the Mercedes of Valtteri Bottas, very, very constant speed. He's the race leader and clearly not doing anything dangerous here. If Bottas was sort of going and stopping and going and stopping, that would be a problem, that would be a different case. I'm sure Hamilton would have been on the radio saying that's not right. In fact, Hamilton defended Bottas, saying that's the normal thing that he did. And the speed graph shows exactly that. He's very steady, giving everyone a chance to sort of follow him and then go when he goes, until he finally accelerates, and that's the acceleration of a Formula 1 car flat out, basically. Next car to point out is Lando Norris. The dotted orange in the midst of all the other colours, but you can just see, as all the other cars spike up, you can see Norris is slightly more up and down than Valtteri Bottas, but that's completely normal on a safety car restart because you're in the pack, but you're a little bit more ready to go and you've got to hold the pace. Bottas is controlling the pace. He can be very constant on the throttle, but everyone else is reacting to that, just on the brake slightly or lifting off slightly and on the throttle slightly. And Norris is relatively consistent as well in 8th place. Then we get the white colour of Daniel Kvyat. And this is where the throttle, the speed trace suddenly seems to spike up a little bit more. And he accelerates a little bit, then accelerates again. And you can see the two-phase acceleration of the white graph of Kvyat here. And basically, every other colour that you see is the car behind accelerating a little bit harder and slowing down a little bit later. So Kvyat accelerates more aggressively than Norris. He's left a gap and he accelerates for kind of a prolonged period of time as well. So it's that acceleration that means that the yellow colour of Esteban Ocon accelerates with him. And Ocon slows down slightly later than Daniel Kvyat. You can see where Kvyat, his speed reduces, Ocon's reduces a little bit later. Next up, George Russell, the blue colour for the Williams. He's left a bigger gap actually to the two cars ahead. He's been caught a little bit short from Kvyat's acceleration. But when he does accelerate, it's a little bit quicker than Esteban Ocon, and he brakes now quite a lot later than Ocon. And again, we've got all the cars behind. Kevin Magnussen, Nicholas Latifi, now we're getting pretty sketchy. Latifi, big swerve as he spotted Magnussen, who was relatively hard on the brakes. You can see his line decelerating at a harder rate than George Russell's. Then we have Antonio Giovinazzi coming in hotter even than Kevin Magnussen. He's in the slipstream, he's on the power for longer. He sees the incident later, and it all happens like that. The graph shows it clearly. Finally, Carlos Sainz, who's behind Giovinazzi, the orange colour, he's quicker even than all the cars ahead of him. And you see basically the ones that never get going again are Sainz and Giovinazzi, who have a big smash and immediately stop, and Kevin Magnussen, who has a big hit from the rear and basically comes to a stop as well. Latifi ultimately was a little bit unlucky because he did swerve around Kevin Magnussen, but he got collected by Giovinazzi, who was having his own crash with Magnussen. And that's what slowly dragged Latifi to a standstill as well, much further on. But that's the graph that very clearly illustrates where this incident came from, in my opinion. I can understand what Kvyat was trying to do. I can understand what most of them were trying to do. In the midfield, it's so close. Every position gained, you can look like more of a hero. Did he do anything really wrong according to the rules? I'm not sure. And that's probably why the FIA didn't punish any of them, but they did give them a warning. There's going to be a big debate in the next driver's briefing, I'm sure, in Sochi, because it was a bit of a dangerous situation that we don't want to see come up too much more. So that was a look into the big pile-up on the safety car restart, but what caused the safety car in the first place? For more of a look into the first lap crashes and how the race was ultimately won, check it out on F1 TV.